Good afternoon. My name is Michael Champion, and I'm a student. My student number with Waldorf is 91760, and this is to satisfy the requirements of the Unit 7 presentation. So without further ado, I'll begin. First, I want to say welcome to the 180 fire marshals, deputy fire marshals, all training directors that are with us today, and a special welcome to all the esteemed National Fire Protection Association, National Fire Academy, the National Safety Council, as well as the National Association of Insurance Commissioners members that are in attendance today. Welcome commanders, leaders, teammates, and a special thanks to all those who are on shift today and can't be with us, who are protecting those who defend America. And thank you for gathering everyone to proactively reduce risk within our communities. The goal of my presentation today is to bring attention to the challenges and the opportunities that will be faced by the DoD community in our risk reduction efforts, not just now, but especially in the future. So again, I'm Chief Mike Champion. What we're going to talk about today are, first I'm going to give an icebreaker for the topic. We're going to talk about the future state of Department of Defense fire prevention, the fire service culture within DoD specifically, working with citizens and community outreach, training, education, and professional development, not just for your internal customers, firefighters, but also for your external customers, those in the communities that we serve. We'll also talk about changes in the workforce and in society in general, future challenges, community risk reduction or CRR leadership within the fire department. Finally, we'll talk about public safety, personnel risk reduction, and I'll give some final comments at the end. So a little bit about me. Again, my name is Michael Champion. I did 22 years, 5 months active duty in the Air Force. Retired as a Senior Master Sergeant, or an E8. You can see in this image me kind of throughout time. I kind of consider myself an ops-centric fire chief. Never forgot where I came from. The badge that you see there is the fire protection badge with 4 bugles because I retired as a deputy fire chief. There's me and my wife getting ready to go to the Air Force birthday, which, by the way, September 18th is the Air Force birthday. So happy birthday to all the airmen out there. You'll see me evaluating an exercise when I was a member of the wing evaluations team, and that last image was when I was a fire chief at an Army ammunition plant, and I had to be out there and burning with my folks. I really believe in leadership from the front, that's important, and that we should always walk our talk. So that's me in a nutshell. I also want to mention that in addition to my fire family, I have my family, right? And they kind of get intermixed. And I consider every firefighter that I've ever served with a member of my fire family, and that's forever. So I go by Mike or Champ. Please feel free to call me either. And I want to close this slide out with mention that we are all community risk reduction champions. You'll hear me refer to that a lot. Champions. So what is a champion? It's someone that goes into battle for an issue, right? Takes the thoughts and represents others as they go into battle as a champion, as they did in the old days. So my icebreaker for the topic: holistic community risk reduction with FES, or Fire and Emergency Services, as the champion. So in the engineer community that I come from, engineers lead the way, and it's more than just a bumper sticker. Engineers lead the way. So firefighters lead the way, and Fire and Emergency Services has a very unique leadership opportunity to lead the way as the community risk reduction champions. And it's more than just fire. It's more than just fire. It's emergency management. It's disaster preparedness. It's security and law enforcement considerations. So some things that we need to look at are the fact that we have several generations under every roof at every station across the world with the DoD. Some of those generational differences are significant, but we really have to focus on our understanding of each other, the overall expectation and goals for where our CRR programs are headed, and the fact that we have to work together and understand the common goals of community risk reduction, not just today, but where it needs to be in the future. We have to have that vision, and not just have it, but talk about it openly and candidly amongst each other, so that we can pave efforts into the community risk reduction that we'll need tomorrow. Many hands make light work. Speaking of, if at some time we find that we're not headed in the right direction, we have to be careful to always remain flexible to change those plans as things change, as the world changes around us. Just because it's a good plan now doesn't mean it'll be relevant tomorrow. So we always have to keep that in our sights. The future state of DoD fire prevention. There's one thing that's for certain, and that's the fact that it's becoming more and more of a data fueled process, especially with code compliance and enforcement, and communicating to decision makers now and in the future the information almost to a near real-time data standard, so that we can, one, express the criticality and the prioritization as risk advisors to our commanders and our other leaders, coming from a proactive culture and a reactive world, right? So one thing I've noticed that makes us a little different and valued out there is the fact that we live in a world of detailed plans and planning for all the what ifs, all the future COAs, as they say, or courses of action, what might happen, what is likely to happen, what's unlikely but possible. And in a reactive world, that can be a challenge, but that's certainly something that we should capitalize on and continue to bring to the fight every day, is that proactive culture that we live in. So senior advocates and fire and emergency services education. What are we doing? What are we doing to teach our commanders, teach our senior fire and emergency services stakeholders? One question I would ask of all the fire chiefs out there and leaders at every level is, do you have an appointment with your boss that's above FNES? If you're a commander, are you sitting down with your fire chief? Are you clearing your calendar to sit down with him or her in order to discuss these things and have a as close to a real-time finger on the pulse of the issues that are out there that are affecting your installation? I also wanted to bring up the notion of fire and emergency services as the community risk reduction, or CRR, champion when we're talking about a future state of DoD fire prevention. A lot of departments out there are carving out community risk reduction divisions that are not just fire prevention. Community risk reduction is so much more than fire, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So as they're carving out, or we are carving out, the inclusion of other public safety SMEs in our new CRR divisions, what knowledge are we bringing into our divisions that are more than just fire? Are we bringing in folks with an emergency manager background, the emergency preparedness piece, law enforcement, security, and other public safety disciplines? So this moves us to my next slide, DoD fire service culture. There's an old adage that firefighters hate two things: the way things are and change. And I say that in jest, but that's kind of true in the fact that you have folks that don't like things the way they are, but are not early adopters of change. So that brings us to a conversation of change agents, right? And they come in a lot of different flavors. Early adopters that are on board right away and excited about the change and learning more and getting people on board. Then you also have late bloomers that eventually will come on board when they have to, or maybe they're kind of like undercover early adopters who don't want to seem like they're jumping on the bandwagon, which brings us to the conversation of what I call reluctant rock stars. A lot of times the old guard has really good ideas and input, but they want to be heard and they want to be included. So inclusion, transparent talk about community risk reduction and changes that are coming is so important in the department. Not just in the department, but also to your customers as you're readjusting culture and the internal as well as the external culture within our customers, being firefighters, and our community out there, the folks that we're teaching from a public education standpoint. One other thing I wanted to note is that the fire chief sets the tone and expectation. So if the chief's interested in it, everyone is interested in it by proxy to a certain level. But there's nothing wrong, and I would encourage everybody to be excited about this, to find your flavor for community risk reduction and really get it out there. One thing is certain, that the relationship at that 5 Bugle Fire Chief level with leaders affects all firefighters. So sometimes we as leaders kind of have to put our personality aside and focus on the facts and really make sure that we have positive, proactive relationships with our customers, whether they're internal or external. My next slide discusses working with citizens and community outreach. So there are so many opportunities. My question to you is, what are your touch points? Where are there new opportunities? For example, one that comes to mind right away is Fire Prevention Week. That's only 1 week out of the year. There's also Disaster Preparedness Week. And are you participating in that with folks that are on your installation? Are you interacting with mutual aid partners for Fire Prevention Week and other opportunities? Are you looking for new opportunities and taking advantage of participating in Disaster Preparedness Week? Do you come up or communicate with emergency management and law enforcement on base? There's Police Week. There's a lot of opportunities out there. So I think that we really should kind of put our heads together as a community and figure out where those are, where there are new opportunities, and utilize those to really become a force multiplier for community risk reduction efforts. Training, education, and professional development. The first lens I'd like to look at this through is the internal customer, our firefighters and our fire officers, from a training, education, and professional development perspective. So what are your succession plans, and how is community risk reduction included in those succession plans? Is holistic community risk reduction included? And if not, why not? Have you considered the Center for Professional Safety Excellence's Commission on Professional Credentialing opportunities for your rising stars in your department? What resources will you need to train, educate, develop, and inspire your team today and many years into the future? Highly recommend including pieces of these plans and ideas into your community risk assessment, standard of cover document, and other strategic plans, especially for resource needs that align across budget years, whether they are fiscal year or calendar year. And consider shared resources. Good example of that is if you're currently planning a training ground, have you looked into security or law enforcement and what their needs are, how you can combine resources in order to kind of fund two things at once, especially in an environment of scarce resources with a lot of competition for them. Next, we have training, education, and outreach that speaks more to external customers. And external customers, one would argue, are those that are receiving your community risk reduction, public fire safety education, things of that nature. So when we're talking about a new CRR effort that places Fire and Emergency Services as the champion with a new division, what are those launch plans? Have you spitballed that together and have a plan for how you're going to adapt to customer expectations, and what information are you getting out there? Who's on your new community risk reduction team? what qualifications, certifications, or experiences desired for that team. How will you track goals, target audience, those kind of things? How are we going to track that and keep our finger on that pulse? And including the plans for these efforts in the Community Risk Assessment Standard of Cover helps codify that. And again, consider shared resources. Next, we'll talk about changes in the workforce and in society. One thing I want to mention is that you get a lot of mileage from virtual opportunities. It can reach a lot of people quickly. It's cost effective. It's kind of the way that we're going anymore is virtual opportunities. I will also say that there's really no substitute for face-to-face interactions, especially with folks from the old guard, previous generations. They really appreciate the face-to-face interaction. Another great example of the value of face-to-face interaction is us at this conference here today. The networking that happens, it won't happen virtually. That face-to-face interaction is very important. So again, with generational differences, we really have to embrace tolerance, diversity, and inclusion. And there's definitely differences just in basic language and expectations between generations, but when we all get together and are on the same page, it's really a force multiplier for community risk reduction. Something else I wanted to mention was the Y generation. One thing I've noticed is there's a lot of Ys, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. Questions are good and not a challenge. It helps people understand it, and it actually is quite a catalyst for buy-in when the why is embraced and not seen as a challenge, but as a legitimate question and a desire to be a part of those CRR efforts. So I wanted to also mention alternatives. For example, the workarounds that we had to do during the pandemic. No one has a crystal ball. We don't know what to expect next, but we certainly should be thinking about these and planning these in case we have another pandemic or some situation that we haven't encountered yet in order to continue our efforts. The mission just doesn't stop. We have to be proactive about it. Have a plan B, a plan C, and so on, so that we can continue that mission. Future challenges. Resources will always be a challenge. Communication is key with resources. Figuring out what it is that we need now, what we think we need tomorrow, and many years in the future, starting to think about that, but being flexible in order to change those when it's no longer needed or relevant. Flexibility is important. Culture change, they say, takes about 7 years. So for them to be saying this is the way we've always done it, it takes about 7 years. So be patient. Change agents are few and often bold, but the more I think that we communicate and educate, the closer we'll get to hopefully less than 7 years. Onboarding is a great tool, especially for your new firefighters, to get to the new way we've always done it. And just basic expectation management, including these thoughts and ideas in our standard operating procedures, or SOPs, our standard operating guidelines, and talking about advancement opportunities, specifically with community risk reduction, as folks become excited about that, move up the ranks and start taking on fire officer positions and educator positions within the CRR ranks. So community risk reduction leadership within the fire department. I wanted to first say that the fire chief sets the tone and expectation for culture. So again, if the chief's excited about it and jazzed up about it, everyone is jazzed up about it by proxy, at least in front of the chief, right? Just kidding. A community risk reduction division, what would that look like? What would that look like for you? What would those pay grades look like? What is a promotion path? What's like a succession plan to get those folks who are jazzed up about community risk reduction to that next level? So certainly, attitude is going to control the altitude, especially with community risk reduction. So creating those and demonstrating those positive behaviors and attitudes toward community risk reduction and getting excited about it is going to help drive that altitude. So what's the department's view? I submit that that's shaped by transparent conversations with leaders and the floor, or folks at every level. Are those happening? It's okay to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, and upspin it into where we want it to be. And it's important to include all your personnel in your community risk reduction outreach opportunities. Think of Fire Prevention Week and how operations gets out and interacts with the community and performs community risk reduction outreach commensurate with their level of training, education, and development, and building upon that as the career progresses. Next, I'd like to talk about public safety personnel risk reduction. So that's firefighters, right? Public safety personnel risk reduction. What are we doing to ensure everyone goes home? What that means is that we've done the right things and made the right decisions to reduce risk so that at the end of the shift, everyone goes home and no one is leaving on a stretcher. I submit that the RIT commitment never stops, right? So if I'm willing to put everything in front of me, behind me, my future health, my very life, plans with my family, if I'm willing to put that in front of me, behind me, to come get you out of a jam, does that ever really stop? And that especially goes into health and safety and the mental health piece, the behavioral health piece. Do we have health and safety officers out there? Do we have a peer support program? So that's something to think about and for us to discuss after my briefing, is the RIT commitment, how it doesn't need to stop after the incident. So what programs and initiatives are out there? There's the Healthy In, Healthy Out, Everyone Goes Home program through the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, the Seatbelt Pledge, the 16 life safety initiatives. And I'd encourage everyone just to take a moment, pause, and look to your left and look to your right. And meet that person next to you, maybe exchange business cards or phone numbers. I can't stomp on the podium enough about the power of the network. And, as long as we're all here, just remember that many hands makes for lighter work. Reach out to each other, find out about your programs, and unabashedly share with each other. It's really true that teamwork makes the dreams work. And are there any questions for me at this time? If not, I want to thank you all for your attention and your commitment to gathering and furthering community risk reduction. It's true that Fire and Emergency Services leads the way to robust risk reduction. So again, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.